Hello and welcome to Illuminated Movement Astrology. I'm Nikki, your astrologer, here today to talk about Uranus in Gemini. And I have been waiting for this transit. Let me tell you, Uranus is one of my favorite planets to talk about. And with the incoming transition of all the outer planets moving, as I've talked about in other videos, Uranus is the last one to kind of slide into its new place. And so we're really going to start to feel more of the fullness of some of this energy. So what's in this video? I'm going to talk about the planet Uranus. I'm going to talk about Gemini. I'm going to talk about the two of them together, and then we're going to take it through each of the houses so you can get an idea of what's in store for you by your rising sign, or if you prefer, multiple signs. However you want to do it, it'll be there for you at the end. Everything is time-stamped below, so you can skip to the parts you'd prefer to listen to and skip over other ones that you don't necessarily want to hear at this moment in time. If you've got any questions or comments, let me know below and I'll do my best to answer them. But for now, let's get going on this transit of Uranus in Gemini and what it might have in store for all of us. All right. So for those of you who are new, I usually talk a little bit about the planets in more of an educational type of way, because a lot of the people that watch my videos are either completely brand new to astrology or beginners in some kind of way, and they're learning to decipher the language. So I always spend a little bit of time doing that. So just for a little bit of review, or this could be completely new to you, let's talk about what are actually the parts of an astrology chart. So first off, the planets, they show us what is happening in your chart, okay? The signs show us how that is happening in your chart. And then we have the houses, okay? That shows us where the energy is happening in your chart, okay? The lens of astrology that I use, because there's many different types of astrology, and there's tons of individual astrologers as well who also have their own take, right? Because they have their own life experience and things that they bring to the table. So the way that I look at astrology is through the lenses. It's kind of a mixed lens here of evolutionary and humanistic astrology. And I love these because both of them have to do with self-determination and looking at the chart as a series of events that unfold and grow us as human beings. So in other words, there's not like this is a good chart and this is a bad chart type of thing. Okay, not that there's anything wrong with that. It's great for events, but I find it's not super helpful when we're talking to actual human beings. So that's why I like to look at it. I like to look at it as this is a part of your consciousness. Is it working well? Is it not working well? How much is it integrated, right? We can always look at this through different viewpoints in that way so that we get off of this tangent of, oh, you have a bad Uranus placement and therefore you're screwed, right? That's just not helpful. Sometimes the quote unquote worst placements are actually the magic ingredient in someone's chart. And I have found that more often than not to be true. So that's the way I look at it. And the last thing I want you to keep in mind is that any chart is a map of potential. Okay, so the planets will show us the energy of what is most likely to happen or what might happen, but it's not a written in stone guarantee that this is the only thing that is going to occur and somehow it's fated or doomed to be a certain way. Okay, it's really just a map of potential, and it's up to you how you work with it and not work with it. And there's a ton of different factors and nuances that go into that, right? So just keep that in mind. All right, so getting to the planet of Uranus. Oh, shoot. I love when I do stuff like that and I don't actually play my slideshow. That's so nice. Okay. Oh, well, now you know I'm not AI. That's going to be nice, knowing people that are not artificially generated because they make mistakes like the one I just made. So here we go. Full screen slide now. So we're talking about the planet Uranus. I've got the symbol for it there. So if you're looking at your chart, that is the funky little, it kind of looks like a, I don't know, like a satellite dish, or not really a satellite dish, but something like an antenna that picks things up to me. Anyway, the sign that Uranus rules is Aquarius. It's the modern ruler of Aquarius, right alongside Saturn. Okay, its position, it's an outer planet. So that means that it's outside of the visible planets. when we're talking about the outer planets, we're talking about energies that feel less personalized. They feel less in our day to day, and they seem to feel like they happen more in the collective or in events that come from, in a sense, the outside in. Okay. When we look at more of the personal planets, it tends to be things that we deal with on a close range, day to day, week to week kind of energy. Outer planets, because they move so slowly, in this case, Uranus is going to be in Gemini for about 7.5 years-ish. Okay. That's a long time. If we look at the planet like the moon, which is technically not a planet, but it's a luminary. But anyhow, it moves signs every about 2.25 days. So when we talk about a long-term transit, we're talking about the outer planets and things that really shape us and shape society around us in new ways. From the lenses of humanistic and evolutionary astrology, we're talking about things that evolve us ultimately. Okay, whether they're positive, whether they're negative, whether we like them or lump them, they're there to help us. And if you can keep that in mind, that also can be useful, even if it's really, really frustrating when you're dealing with a long-term transit. So when we're talking about Uranus, there's a lot of different keywords and concepts that come up with this planet. I like to think about it as the glitch in the matrix. It's this moment, this little schism that kind of happens that gets our attention and stops us and goes, whoa, what was that? Right? So it breaks through just the routine, status quo, business as usual, on and on and on kind of stuckness that all of us can get comfortable with. Uranus comes along and kind of says, hey, what's that over there? Or maybe it'll drop in an idea, right? It's known for these big intellectual downloads of information that are really, really dense and sometimes kind of hard to decipher fully. For me, it fits more in the Promethean archetype of Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods, right? Went out to the edge, pulled something down and brought it back to humanity, which ultimately changed humanity completely. Now, the reason why I like this is A, it fits a lot better, and B, because it also pulls in one of the more difficult aspects of Uranian energy, which is persecution. So if you know the story of Prometheus, he got punished big time for stealing fire from the gods and bringing it down, right? And so oftentimes what will happen with people who have a really strong Uranus in their chart, so someone who has Uranus with their sun or their moon or their personal planets, or maybe it's sitting on one of their angles, there can be this sense of big pushback, sometimes punishment, sometimes rejection, persecution, types of energies, because they're either so different or they brought back some kind of information or are sharing something with humanity that will advance it in such a way that it's almost like the world isn't quite ready for it, right? Or those who are, quote, in control don't want humanity to have this life-altering type of technology that would change everything forever. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind when you're working with Uranian energy or looking at your own chart. Uranus is very, very fast. Like, the energy is light speed. So if you know someone, or maybe it's you, who has Uranus strongly in their chart, they want to go, 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 right? They really can get frustrated with people around them that feels like they're slowing them down. So we've had Uranus in Taurus since 2018, and now Uranus is going to be moving into a different sign. Uranus in Taurus is a different energy. Uranus wants to go fast and Taurus doesn't. So there's been this real kind of push-pull struggle energy going on with Uranus and Taurus, where it's felt like nothing is moving. Like, we have all this information, we have all these changes, we have all these things we want to push forward, and it's been like dragging a sled full of boulders behind us, right? But when Uranus moves into Gemini, it's going to feel completely different, because Gemini is an air sign. It's all about moving energy. So we're going to be getting this lightning fast energy with something that likes to move things. So hang on, buckle in. Stuff's about to change very, very dramatically, but we'll get to that. So we're talking about, with Uranus, like this spirit of discovery. It's breakthroughs. It can be breakdowns, right? But they don't necessarily have to be bad. It connects us to the cosmic mind, a little different than Neptune. Neptune is a little bit more of like the muse. It brings through a person this expression of creative energy that goes beyond just the individual. If you're an artist and you've channeled that and you're like, I don't know, this song is just, it's writing me, like I'm just the vessel. That's big time Neptune energy. Uranian energy doesn't feel quite the same. Uranian energy is just this moment of all of a sudden, you don't know how you know, but you know. And you have this vision of something that's kind of far away, right? It's an outer planet that you know you need to bring back, and you're maybe not even sure how to do it. Or again, it feels out of sync with the people around you. And that can lead to frustration, rejection, persecution, all those kinds of things that we'll see with Uranian energy. So it has a future-oriented type of energy. Again, it's bringing things back. So often it can feel weird or eccentric or again, out of sync with time. But it's not always future-oriented. The truth is Uranus can really move in any direction. It can bring things back from the past, from, for those of you who are into this might be a little too woo for others, but the quantum time, like it can bring things from sideways and upways and quadruple ways and backflippy ways, who even knows, right? But it can bring it in a non-linear fashion. And that's very, very Uranian as well. And that's part of why it can feel so kind of discombobulating when we get this big Uranian energy. It's like, where did that come from? Right? Again, that glitch in the matrix that goes, what was that? Okay. So we're talking about things, again, that are eccentric, that are weird, that are different. And Uranus is the weird planet. I love Uranus. It's my favorite planet. I love that it's on its side. It's almost 90 degrees on its side. So when it turns in its orbit, it's rolling like a wheel. And I think that's a really important image with Uranus is the wheel, because yes, it turns things, but it also returns things. Okay, so that it's kind of that statement of like, what is old is new again. Okay, it can bring things back around. Looking at Uranus and Taurus, right? Homesteading, growing home food, stuff like that became very, very fashionable again, right? It brought it back around. So it's not always just gonna take us cray-cray land. Sometimes it brings things back. Now, of course, during Uranus in Taurus, we also have been getting all this big push for bioengineered foods and lab-grown foods and things that are very kind of futuristic and not human friendly, for lack of a better term, because Uranus can be an energy that's quite detached, right? It's far from Earth. And so the further out a planet gets, the less kind of heart-centered it can feel to us as we're receiving the energy. So Uranus is often portrayed as breaking the rules, right? Because it does. It's on its side. It's the planet that broke the natural order of there's only planets up to Saturn, right? That was the edge of the known universe. And then all of a sudden in 1781, it's like, oh, there's something else out there, right? So it's disruptive by nature. Okay. The point of Uranus is to help us either on an individual level or a collective level or both, right? To move on, to evolve past things that have become oppressive or stuck or restrictive or don't further our evolution. Okay, it's drawn into that enlightening type of energy that brings about massive changes, hopefully ultimately liberation and freedom, but not necessarily always. So looking at Uranus, it is the release valve. If you think of working with Uranian energy, however it happens to be hitting your chart as a release valve, I found that's really helpful. It's showing us kind of this point where things have gone too far and there's pressure building. It's building, it's building, it's building, right? If you've ever watched a pressure cooker, right? Or you boil a pot with the lid on, there has to be room for the steam to escape or it's going to blow the lid off, right? And that's when Uranus can feel the most disruptive or even traumatic, right? That's a word that's sometimes associated with Uranus as well, because it deals with things that we've become attached to. right? We maybe didn't want the lid to blow off that relationship or that job or whatever it happens to be, but here it is, right? And so, kind of like Pluto, but different, it tends to point to things where we have become comfortable, right? Some might say stagnant, and usually it's the place where things have become stagnant. Okay. So we're talking about breaks and patterns. Again, we're talking about realignment. We're talking about breaking something up that is coagulated to the point where it's basically like dying, right? It's de-evolving. And so Uranus comes along and helps us wake up, whether we like it or not, to A, that fact, and B, kind of points us to where we might need to go. So again, the more you can engage with this energy, the better. Okay, the more you can let the steam come out before the lid blows off, the better. Now, sometimes the lid's just going to blow off and that's the way it is. But usually, if you pay attention, there's something nagging in your life. There's something stuck. There's something funky. There's something kind of just there that's maybe always been there. Those sometimes are those indications of where Uranus is going to come up and kind of start ruffling the feathers, right? Doesn't have to be a huge upset. Sometimes it just says, hey, let's turn that picture sideways, right? And then you look at it and you're like, wow, actually, I never liked that painting until I turned it sideways and now it's great. So it doesn't have to be this huge, again, traumatic, life altering. What are all the other buzzwords that all these freaking spiritual channels use on their headlines? Right? It's like life altering changes and things will never be the same. Well, yeah, no, like no shit. That's the nature of change, right? Is to make things not the same. So don't let people freak you out about Uranus. In our personal chart, Uranus points to where, which is the house, okay, and how, which is the sign. We long to be different, right? Uranus is that planet on its side, rolling along, breaking apart the structure of the known universe. And we all have a little bit inside of us that reflects that in whatever way it reflects that for us personally, right? It's where we want to be a little different. It's where we want to break out of the way everyone else does things, right? It's also, in a sense, our wheel of fortune. Uranus can, again, turn that wheel. Maybe things were going great, they're up, and now they're kind of sideways, and now they're down, right? But they always come back up. And so if you think about Uranus as the wheel of fortune, that can kind of help you to navigate some of the ups and downs, because that's just part of life, right? Things go up, sometimes they're your way, sometimes they're not. So yes, it can signify disruptions and breakthroughs and reversals of fortune, but they don't always have to be negative, okay? Uranus will also show us, basically, in a sense, where we have our own personal genius, because it's where we go outside the box. It's where we go kind of above and beyond. It's where we go maybe where no one else has gone, at least in our personal sphere, right? Or at least perhaps in our time period. And that's pretty amazing. So it really can be this part of us that helps us to be the best, most unique, incredible versions of ourselves. Now, some of the really challenging pieces here is Uranus also shows us what our vision of perfection is. And perfection it's such a great thing, because we do want to strive for things that are better, but it can be such a what do I want to say? Like a thing that holds us back as well, because we can never really actually achieve perfection, right? In this humanistic way, it just kind of doesn't work like that. So we can get stuck in things have to be perfect before we enact changes, right? So we can kind of take that Uranus and roll the wheel backwards, in a sense, or roll it in place. And it's like it really just kind of needs to go somewhere else. Another challenging piece there that we talked about is the rejection, the persecution, the being in trouble in some way for being different, right? It's where we can be an outcast, whether it's in our family, whether it's in our culture, whether it's in our job, whether it's in our neighborhood, whatever it is, that can be really difficult for us, right? Human beings have a wired sense of belonging, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So it's where we can feel like we're a deviant or an outcast or separated, And we may or may not enjoy that. There are some people with very strong Uranian or even Aquarian types of energies that seek out being separated on purpose. They don't want to be part of the group, right? Reminds me of, what was his name? Groucho Marx. And he had a saying, something to the effect of, I would never be a member of a group that would have me as a member, right? That kind of energy. So that can also be challenging as well, because there is on some level a need for social cohesion, but there's also a need for us to balance being an individual. Okay? And Uranus points to both of those places. So Uranus can also be where we do feel like we need to break away because we feel restricted or suffocated or stagnant. And if we look at our personal chart, our natal chart, it's going to show us the theme that we deal with most often throughout our life. And by transit, it's going to show us what we're dealing with for the next period of time. Usually Uranus is pretty even. It's around 7 years, between 7 to 8 years, what we may be wanting to bust out of at that point, if we're talking about a transit. So we did talk about some of these challenging uranium themes already. A lot of it has to do with, feeling, again, shocked by something that happened, or having upset because things didn't go as scheduled, or they went off course, or they're moving too fast or too slow, or they feel chaotic, right? Sometimes when we're talking about non-conformity, it really becomes conformity, right? There's kind of this thing that it shares with Leo about being special versus non-special. Okay, Uranian energy shares with Aquarius this loves humanity but hates the people, right? This thing is for everybody. It's democratic, except it's only for this special chosen small slice of the democratic people at large, right? That type of thing can come up here. Again, there can be things that feel traumatic. It's a word that I don't necessarily love to use at this point because it's been so hackneyed and overused. We'll talk about that when we get to the Gemini portion. But it can be, it can be like, oh my gosh, I didn't see that coming and I wasn't prepared for it. And now what? Because again, it disrupts our sense of what's familiar and what we know. We may like that. It might be a welcome relief, and it might be something that really shakes us to our core, especially if it's something that we built our identity around. Again, whether it's a job, a relationship, politics at this point, identity politics is a big thing. That's going to start shattering apart. It's going to be really hard for people to deal with. Whatever it happens to be, that can be a big challenge with Uranus. So when we're looking at, well, how can we use Uranus to our advantage, right? Again, it gives us insight, really, it just completely defies conventional time. It's stuff that we have in us that has a long-term vision. Remember our idea of perfection, right? It's this goal that we can be willing to work towards for the long haul. As much as Uranus is about change and evolution, some people just, I think, too much associate it with shocking drama, blah, which even saying that gives me anxiety. But that's not all of it. Remember, Uranus rules over Aquarius, and Aquarius is the mind, okay? And it's about social interactions on a collective level. But Aquarius is also fixed air, meaning it's in it for the long haul. It wants to take something to its apex. And so Uranus has definitely this ability for a long-term goal, something it sees far down the road that it'll work towards achieving. Okay, so it's not always just chaos. I think we really need to move away from Uranus and chaos. And having a long-term vision can be a really, really great thing. It helps us in so many ways on an individual and a collective level. Again, usually these types of things are a little bit weird or they're different. But if you think about things that are weird or different, at some point they're not anymore, right? It's like everyone else catches up and all of a sudden they're, socially acceptable. Again, whether that's positive or negative, we're just talking about the energy in general. So if you felt like a super weirdo because you had an idea and everyone around you looked like you were crazy, give it a couple years, keep doing your thing, keep working towards your vision, and people will eventually catch up. So for those Uranians out there, that's a little pro tip for you. Uranus wakes us up again to things that are stuck, okay, or that are inverted to a way that they're actually hurting us, right? If we go back to Uranus and Taurus and looking at in the United States, like food chemicals, right? So we took the food that was supposed to be healthy, we inverted it with all these chemicals. Well, we need to turn that right side up, right? And Uranus points to like, hang on, that's not quite right. So that can be a really good thing. Okay, and again, Uranus does not always just break things apart and cause chaos. It drives me nuts when I hear astrologers just pigeonhole Uranus to that, because there's so much more to Uranus. Okay, it really can bring things back and bring fragmented things back together. Okay, like that picture I chose on the bottom with the puzzle piece heart. That's why I chose it, right? It can bring those puzzle pieces back together, different colors, different shapes, different whatever they were, and then we can see the clear picture of it. Or it can be reformed in a new way that fits us better where we are now. Okay, so Uranus doesn't always just throw a bowling ball and knock down all your pins. Sometimes it's bringing the puzzle pieces together. Uranian people. So those of us wonderful, amazing human beings who happen to be born with strong Uranian energy in our chart. All these Uranian themes will be a part of who we are. It's baked into our little human cake. Okay, it's going to be a lifetime of experiencing Uranian energy. Whereas people who experience it by transit, they may feel it. It may just be happening something in the background. Maybe it hits a planet or two of theirs and they're like, whoa, they have a Uranian time period. Uranian people, this is who they are. So you are the literal glitch in the matrix. You are absolutely wired to pick up signals other people miss, because you literally process things differently, uniquely, intuitively, non-linearly, right? Densely, spontaneously, out of sync with time, against the grain. All of those types of things are how you're wired. Okay, so you were born to awaken yourself, definitely, but potentially also other people around you. Okay, and this can often be done through disruptive or sometimes shocking revelations that seem out of sync. Okay, again, you kind of are the disruptor. It's just your energy. It's neither negative nor positive. It just is, right? And it's going to go on both sides of the spectrum like anything else. One of the challenging things about this is leading to gaslighting. Again, another word I'm not the biggest fan of, but hopefully y'all know what I mean at this point, because that word has become so pervasive in the mainstream. The reason this qualifies is that because you see things that other people don't see, or pick up on things that other people don't necessarily see, or envision things that are way past, the people around you's limited perceptions, those people around you will probably try to like correct you and say like, oh, that's crazy, or oh no, that'll never be, or I didn't say that, or whatever it is. All right, they'll label you as too weird, or they'll dismiss you in some kind of way. And that can be really difficult. Again, that can lead to feeling like this rejection of self, to the point where, well, I better cover up what's weird about me or different. I better not share that so that I can fit in. Or it can kind of flip the other way, and it's like, well, screw all of you. Nobody gets me. I'm a rebel without a cause forever, and I don't need anybody, and I'm going to go be a loner permanently. Okay, it can kind of go, it doesn't necessarily have to be those two extremes. Maybe it bounces back and forth, right? Or any kind of nuance in between. Uranian energy is intense. It is very intense. Again, it's very high frequency, not saying high as in the sense of like better than, not necessarily on that kind of scale. But it's very dense. It's very intense. It's very floating. And for some people, it's too much. They don't vibe that kind of way. They're like, oh my gosh, like your actual presence can just irritate them. Just you walking in a room. Right. And that can be difficult because you think, well, what did I do? I just walked in and people are looking at me like, I've got 6 heads and like 12 arms. What is going on? Other people can perceive your energy in ways that irritates or upsets them, and they don't even necessarily know why. Okay. But it doesn't always occur that way. It can also be incredibly incredibly inspirational energy for people who, again, are attuned to it and wired towards it themselves. Not necessarily other Uranian people, although usually there's an affinity between Uranian types because their weird makes sense to other weird people, right? Like you get my weird. But really it can be incredibly inspirational because you see things from an elevated point, because your energy is drawing things in from the future, because it sees a level of perfection in everything. That can be incredibly inspiring to people. Okay, so you're not always going to be dealing with people who essentially are short circuiting from being around you. Sometimes you're really able to like high vibe others just from your presence. Okay. So Uranian people very often either come from backgrounds or they find themselves in circumstances that have become rigid or kind of old and crusty, rusty, like they just aren't really working anymore. Possibly that's stifling or authoritarian or rigid or restrictive, any of those kinds of things. Often Uranian people, again, will either have a background of or find themselves in those types of situations because there's a necessity for the Uranian impulse to occur in the first place. If there was no need to evolve something or break free of something or do something kind of sideways or out of the box, there'd be no need for Uranian energy. Okay, so there's a purpose to it. It's not because you're being punished or other people around you are trying to hold you down, although it does usually happen that way. There's an impulse there. There's something that needs to change. And you, as the force of change, there you are, right? So that's what that's about. Okay. So there is always going to be something to need to reform or break away from or disrupt in some way. Now, sometimes it's not always welcome. And you have to, if it's situations and circumstances that you're walking into, kind of know if that situation actually wants to be disrupted fully, because they really might not want that, right? So that's kind of a thing with Uranus too, is kind of figuring out the people part of, does that person actually want their mind blown right now? Or can you just kind of like maybe give it a beat and see if that's something that develops? Okay, just words from a Uranian right here, things I've learned the hard way. So I will pass on my gems of wisdom should they be useful to you, or throw them away if they're not. Again, Uranian people move at lightning speeds. They are very often ahead of the time, which contributes to them being perceived as weird and facing rejection, those kinds of things, disruptive, etc. To the Uranian person, they're not being disruptive. Like they're not the weird one in a sense. And they can also get agitated by people around them being too slow. Like to a Uranian person, it can really literally feel like people are moving backwards because you're moving so quickly, right? So for my Uranian people out there, people around you are not trying to drive you nuts by moving so slow. They're just moving at their pace. And for the non-Uranian people who know a Uranian, they're not trying to drive you nuts. They're literally just on a different, like they're sprinting when you're just, taking a leisurely stroll. So kind of figure out how to balance that, where the other is coming from. And that could be helpful. So Uranian people often live lives that are full of twists and turns and changes and reversals of fortune and reformations and quantum leaps and all of those kinds of things all rolled around is just part of their life story. So let's talk about Gemini. Gemini symbol, twin pillars, right? With a top and a bottom. So there's an interesting piece to Gemini that it may actually be two sets of twins, but usually Gemini is just thought of as the twins, right? The twin pillars. And that space in the middle is really fascinating. We'll kind of talk about this a little bit later down the line when we get to Uranus and Gemini, but often with Gemini, there is two sides, right? There's two ways of doing things. There's a dualistic nature. But there's also this amazing kind of doorway or a portal, if you like that terminology, that gets created by these two ways where you can make a third way. Okay. And I think that's going to be really important for the collective coming up, that we need to kind of maybe not choose the extreme polarization so much on either side, but look for the third way. Look for the window in the middle. What's in there? Because I think that's really going to be where the magic is for this Uranus and Gemini time. So going back to Gemini, Gemini is the sign that's ruled by Mercury. Mercury has to do with the mind, how we process information, put things together, learn, speak, talk, joke, all of those kinds of things. And as I mentioned earlier, Gemini is an air sign, right? It's mutable air. Aquarius is fixed air. So even though Gemini and Aquarius share a lot of things in common from being air signs, the way they go about it is quite different. Gemini wants to move things. It has a lot to do with movement, right? It's the breath, it's the air that we speak out, it's our brothers and sisters, right? It's sharing and exchange, it's social, it's intellectual, it's youthful, okay? There, it has to do with communication and networking of all kinds. We're talking about articulation and debate and variety. We're talking about curiosity. These are all great Gemini words. We're talking about, again, voicing things, speaking up, two sides, multi-sides. Gemini is not just necessarily two, but more than one, right? So that can lead to sometimes Gemini being perceived as two-faced, right? Or fickle. Well, to the Gemini energy, that's not how they see it. They see it as holding two different things at once, right? Or they see it as, well, this and that are true. It's not necessarily an either or all of the time. Often it's happening together. So if they tell you they don't like vanilla ice cream, and in the next sentence they tell you it's their favorite, it's probably both true. Although to the non-Gemini energy, it's like, what? You just said the opposite thing. Okay. With that, they're versatile, very versatile. Again, it's a mutable change of season energy. So it's going to go from one thing to another, unlike Aquarius that wants to hold its position, okay, because it's fixed. So when we're talking about Gemini, some of the things can be difficult around being phony, being a know-it-all, being artificial, being overly opinionated or fickle or non-committal. That can be an issue too that other people find challenging. Gemini has to do, again, with our siblings, right? It's a set of twins, so it could represent things that have to do with your siblings in your life or your relationship to them. Also has to do with our education, our local community, our localized one. Sagittarius is international, or people who are foreign to us or far away. And it has to do with local travel and the marketplace. Okay, Taurus is the physical things that we would find in a marketplace, and Gemini is the act of trading them, negotiating them, the sales part of it. So that's to do with your hands and your arms. I didn't notice the hand gestures. All right, so Gemini, in our personal chart, it's showing us our drive to understand reality, okay, through observation, comparison, language, in a sense, our brothers and sisters. It's how we connect the dots, okay? It's the part of us that needs to speak, to ask, to joke, to compare, to experiment, to translate, to learn. It's our capacity to perceive, adapt, communicate, connect. Okay? It's how we process and exchange information internally and externally with ourselves and those around us. By house, it's where we learn to communicate, to learn, to connect, where we need movement. Okay, it's where we need curiosity and duality, all of those things that are necessary for our growth. When we have planets in Gemini, planets here will show us how the drive to connect, to question, to communicate, to network, to learn, et cetera, how those things that we described above come alive through the particular planet. Pause real quick. Oh, Remy. Dog, you're making me nuts. All right, so some challenging Gemini themes. Well, superficiality, manipulative talk, or information sharing. Information sharing that maybe we didn't want to have shared, right? Kind of that breach of privacy issue, or gossip mongering. That's a big one with Gemini. It's where any of us can be a gossip, right? It can be scattered, anxious, ungrounded, restless, avoiding commitment. With Gemini, it likes to move and it doesn't necessarily care about what it's moving or how. So there's an emphasis sometimes on speed and not so much on substance. Okay, so be careful who and what you listen to in this time period coming up. It's going to be really important. Another challenging aspect to Gemini is speaking without listening, right? There's that saying, we have two ears, but one mouth, right? So we should be listening more than talking. Well, sometimes with Gemini, it doesn't always work that way. Also with Sagittarius, because they're on the same axis, right? There can be talking just to talk, talking over others, interrupting, speaking without thinking, not being interested in conversational exchange. Okay, remember a positive aspect here is exchange. Well, if it's not functioning or it's under functioning, then there's no exchange and the conversation redirects to the self, right? It just loops around. So someone may be telling a story and all of a sudden the other person in the conversation just, oh yeah, that's, I did that too, or that reminds me of my time, or, oh yeah, that, whatever it is, they just keep swinging the conversation back to themselves. That can be a Gemini over or under function, right? It's that exchange level is somehow out of whack. Echo chambers can be a big problem with Gemini energy, intellectual silos, choice overload, analysis paralysis, right? Having to know it all, whether you're being a know-it-all or feeling that there's this pressure to know answers to things that you may not have answers to or haven't learned or just are completely out of your capacity. There could be a lot of pressure around that. Remember, Gemini and Sagittarius are on the same axis here. It's possible for this energy to become condescending, morally arrogant, really, really wants to avoid looking uninformed or unintelligent or in some way uncultured. Okay. So sometimes what can happen is the want to avoid those things results in deceit or deception, like someone pretending they have an answer to something that they know nothing about. Okay, that's just one example. There can be a struggle to make decisions of any kind, right? Just the act of making a decision can sometimes be overwhelming or challenging when Gemini energy gets kind of out of whack. There can be a lot of vacillation. Again, things that are dualistic, so that they appear two-faced, or they could be double dealing. And perhaps, that's happening on a conscious, purposeful level. It might not be, but both of them kind of are not so fun when you're on the receiving end of them, right? Or they could become pluralistic, meaning that there's a loss of cohesion, right? It's just scattered all over the place. And now there's no sense of order or structure or identity or things like that. So advantageous Gemini themes. So we talked about some of the things that are not so great. Let's talk about some things that are great. Connecting. That's really a big one here. Connecting people and ideas, things, whatever it is, hopefully in ways that are beneficial and mutually beneficial, right? Again, there's that trade and exchange going on here. Gemini is where the energy helps us exchange, communicate, engage, share with other people and places and ideas and things that are new to us, right? It's that energy of learning something new, being a beginner, kind of looking foolish in some way, part of that fool's journey, right? It helps us be able to articulate complex ideas into simple terms, be able to spot patterns and make connections. It's where we can be interested in alternative viewpoints or ideas or ways of doing something, right? Variety is so important. It's one of the ingredients to happiness, actually. We get as human beings depressed when everything is just the same remote, not remote, rote, that's the word I wanted, thing day after day after day. We tend to get kind of like this, right? So it's part of what can give Gemini its youthful energy is the variety and is the being a beginner and being curious. It really helps us, literally helps us on a physical level, on a mental, neurological level, make new synapses and connections. It's a great thing, right? And again, it helps us with circulation and trade and marketplaces and networks and socializing, all of which are incredibly, incredibly important. And I think we really, really need to get back to, because there's been a loss, especially over the last 5 years, of circulation, of trade, of marketplaces, of socializing, social skills, right? Social cohesion, that type of thing really took a big hit during the Pluto and Capricorn era in general. So that started in 2008, but really, really ramped up from 2020 till about now. It's been difficult. And I think the Gemini energy is coming in right on time. So Gemini people, as you probably noticed, if you listen to the Uranian part, but Gemini people are those who are born with this strong energy in their chart. It's baked into their human cake, okay? So they're born to connect. Anything and everything, people, places, ideas, things, whatever. It's on the menu for a Gemini person. There's a strong need to learn, to communicate, to exchange, to articulate. There could be a enjoyment of learning languages or working with a variety of people, of places, right? Perhaps working with their hands. That could be very enjoyable for someone who has a strong Gemini energy to their chart. They may live a life of change. Remember, Gemini likes to move. Okay, so there's a possibility here of juggling things, whether it's commitments, views, relationships, jobs, towns, interests, hobbies, you name it, they're probably juggling it. It's possible that they can be mired in mixed messages, right? Misunderstandings, lack of communication, because the ultimate goal is to get really good at those things. And so in order to practice being good at communicating, well, you got to be also learning miscommunication, right? So that's part of Gemini here. We're also looking at facing constant choice. For people with a lot of Gemini energy, making a choice, again, can be really difficult, or they want to make lots of choices and then change their mind and do it another way, right? There could be some doubt around, did I make the right choice? Should I have chosen differently? That can really be strong in the Gemini energy. And again, some of the things to watch out for are becoming a know-it-all, right? Becoming dogmatic, talking over other people, not listening, borrowing other people's ideas or things as though they are your own, or equating having read about something maybe in a book or hearing it from another person as actual knowledge and experience, okay? Or potentially prone to parroting, right? Just repeating things and not thinking about what it is you're actually repeating. Where does that idea actually come from, right? All right, so we're at Uranus in Gemini. Finally, so there's a lot to talk about in this one, more than I could possibly cover in one video, but I've tried to kind of distill down a lot of the things that I see out in the world in the collective here. So now I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the collective than individual, and then we'll go back to individual when we talk about the houses. So the potential positive manifestations here for me, the reclamation of free speech and free think. Okay, taking back ownership of words. Oh my gosh, it's like they lost their meanings, right? There's been a lot of anxiety for many people around words, around speaking, right? The Uranus and Taurus era, coupled with other things, it wasn't just Uranus and Taurus, it was also Neptune and Pisces, it was also Pluto in Capricorn. gave us cancel culture, which sucked. It was horrible. I hated it. It needs to die and go bye-bye and like never be resurrected, but I'm sure it'll be resurrected at some point. But it really made a lot of people afraid to speak because all of a sudden words were literal violence, right? Meanings of words all of a sudden changed, and maybe a common person might not know that. Language got usurped big time by the intelligentsia, academics, and activists, to the point where, again, us regular people just walking around might not have any idea that they're using a word in a completely different way than we're using it. And now they're using it in a way to assert control and aggression, even though they may accuse us of using that same thing. Okay. Even writing these, YouTube videos sometimes gives me anxiety. I'm like, oh my God, someone's going to jump down my throat because I used the word community in a way that they don't like, and they're going to cancel me, and it's going to be a whole to-do. I hate feeling like that. It stinks. So hopefully Uranus and Gemini, remember, Gemini needs to move, it needs to engage, it needs to dialogue. Hopefully between Uranus and Gemini, Neptune moving into Aries, and Pluto being in Aquarius, we can get rid of this ridiculous activist tyranny, right? This moral, so-called intelligent superiority, this unelected, out of control bureaucracy can just go by the wayside, so that we can get back to having civil discourse again, to having civil disagreements, to being able to break out of mind manipulation. That's such a big one. I mean, the obvious term for me with Uranus and Gemini is free your mind. And the rest will follow, right? Those lovely ladies of En Vogue. If you don't know that 90s song, it's amazing. Play it. Especially because Uranus is the ruling planet of Aquarius and Pluto is in Aquarius right now. They, in a sense, I'll do a different video on this, but in a sense, they're kind of doubling up this energy of like, no more of this tyranny. And I think for a lot of people, this is going to be really difficult. They're not going to understand that it may be, even though they're well-intended, that they've been brainwashed, or that they are actually part of the problem, or they've, to kind of reference the meme, they're the baddies. It's going to be really tough for people. They're not going to want to let go of what they think they know, or the power position that word manipulation, mind manipulation, etc., has given them. So that's just kind of a heads up there. I know I didn't write any of that down, but as I'm doing this video, I felt the need to say that. So whoever needs to hear that, there you go. That was for you. All right. So what can we do as people who are really sick of this crap, right? It's going to be a lot easier now to push back on this wrong think, re-education, again, words being misconstrued and misused and all that kind of stuff. It may ramp up, but the ultimate piece is to get it back, to break the chains of language as being used in a weaponized way against most people, okay, against the masses, because that's what really got concretized during the Pluto and Capricorn, Uranus and Taurus, and Neptune in Pisces era. Okay. So the other piece that I think is really exciting possibility here is, again, reclaiming words, but also getting the courage to speak up again and be like, you know what? All right. So you're going to call me a racist. All right. Because the way that something like that has been used, it's gotten so hackneyed and so inverted that it's lost its original meaning. And so in a sense, it's also lost its weaponization power. if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Trying to articulate myself to the best of my ability without pissing off too many people or going on ad nauseum for too long. So moving on. It's also, I think, going to be the act of saying, hey, wait a second, like, that's not true, or that doesn't make sense, or I don't know if that person's telling me the truth, type of thing. That's going to spread out in much more of the collective. Now, for many of us, we've been in that position either for our whole lives or, you know, definitely for the last few years going, wait a minute, like, why is everyone all of a sudden collectively losing their minds? Okay. The return of logic, speaking of people losing their minds. Gemini, ruled by Mercury, that's logical. Okay, there's going to be a return of logic, common sense, rationality, reason, all of these things that, again, because of the previous era we've just come out of, just got busted open, tossed to the side, you know, absolutely gone. Well, we're going to come back to them now. Remember, Uranus is turning and returning. Okay, so we've had this emotional tyranny. We've had oppressive, progressive, it's really regressive, authoritarianism being shoved upon many of us, and it's time to change that. Okay. I think there will be a renaissance of humor and of comedy. Oh my gosh, things need to be funny again, right? I think there's going to be this reemergence of lightheartedness that comes not just from Uranus and Gemini, but all three of the outer planets moving from the heavier energies of water and earth that they were in to fire and air that they are in now. Okay. Fire and air go up and out, right? Earth and water go down and in. So there has been a bit of heaviness. Every time period is necessary. We really needed all that earth and water time. But now it's time to shift to air and fire, which is going to lighten things up considerably. Yes? Going along with reclaiming free speech, rethink, right? Breaking the shackles of wrong think and ideological control is going to happen at an educational level. Okay. All that dogma, all the indoctrination, all the, you know, claiming certain groups can't learn certain things because of their inborn characteristics is absurd and ridiculous. And that's going to start moving away as well. It's already happening, but it's going to accelerate, where people are going to start incorporating much more teaching based on being able to think for oneself. Okay. Based on curiosity, based on investigation, based on asking questions and hands-on experience and actual dialogue. Okay. It's possible that we will be learning new or unusual, at least to us on an individual level, right? Things. It's possible to be breaking free at this time of any sort of system that has been ideologically based or indoctrinating in whatever way that shows up. Maybe it's not necessarily political or in the academia sphere. It could be anything, because it's really kind of our previous era kind of leaked into everything being heavily authoritarian. And we're going to be breaking free of that, because that's the Uranian function, right? We have to have this period of crystallization, stuckness, authoritativeness to break out of. It is literally the catalyst and the impulse, okay? There's a possibility here for parallel systems of things, whether it's economics, whether it's marketplaces, currencies. Okay, currency, not necessarily the actual thing, although, well, that's more the Venus and the Taurus function, but we're talking about the circulation part and the trade part. Okay. Again, education, things that are not so focused on collectivism. That's another thing that's breaking down right now. We're returning more towards individualism and local community spaces. So less of this big globalist thing that has been going on for the last like 100-ish years, and bringing it back down. Like, who's in your neighborhood? Who runs your local marketplace? Who is around you? Like, wanting to have that connection be reformed is going to be really, really big. Now, there's still going to be this online world connecting us from faraway places. There's still going to be all that. But I think there's also going to be alongside of it, and that's why I chose the world parallel, this need to do things in person again, like coffee houses where people actually sit and talk, right? Less of the phones and the tech stuff. Now, some people will go down that road, but I think a positive manifestation is moving away from some of that and getting back to the business of social cohesion. Okay. Media and social media, they're going to change big time. That's already happening. We know that legacy media is crashing, crumbling, because it's built on lies and it's built on this authenticity. It's built on just being this propaganda echo chamber. None of that stuff is gonna stay. It might ramp up for a bit, but eventually it's going to break down. Remember, Uranus is going to be in Gemini for over 7 years, so this may not happen in the first 3 months. Okay. Anything that's based on authoritarianism or inauthenticity, there's going to be pushback on it. However that happens, it could happen as more of a confrontational type of thing. It could happen more, for lack of a better word, organically, or again, there could be things happening alongside that overtake and become bigger. And I think there's a possibility for it to also be things that are like analog, again, analog media. I see people talking more about having physical media, writing magazines again, which I thought, oh my gosh, I haven't read a magazine since the 90s. That's a long time. So it's very possible that we get these other, again, things from the past. What was old is new again. That can come up when we're talking about media types of things. There's going to be revolutions in travel and networking and whatever the marketplace is. And Gemini is the local one. Okay, it's the one around us. It's not necessarily, the overseas online Amazon drop ship type of thing, although that's not necessarily going to just disappear or go away, but hopefully we're going to get more of a balance between the two. Or again, those pillars I talked about with Gemini at the beginning, these two sides, well, there's a third way in the middle. There's a doorway in the middle, a portal that gets created in that Gemini glyph. So something is going to change there, hopefully more towards the positive. Currency shift. So I talked about circulation of currency previously. Currency shift towards crypto type currencies is more possible than ever now. Again, Gemini wants to just move, right? It wants to be more unrestricted, and so does Uranus. So those two things may become part of society at this point, although of course they've been around for a long time, but it may just be how they kind of become the norm in a sense. And changing how trade is done, especially because when we look at the Ingress chart, Uranus and Venus were together. Okay, so again, I think there's going to be this push towards wanting more localized trade, in addition to these other forms of global trade or digital trade or things of that nature. Renewed sense of community, really wanting to come back together, to be face to face. I mean, this is great, and I love this, and I love being able to talk to people all over the world. It's incredible. But there's also, I think, for many of us, this need to know people again, right? To have social cohesion, social interaction, social skills, to be able to be in each other's presence again. Will everyone choose that? No, but I think enough people will that, again, even if it's not back to the norm, it's at least present enough to be felt in an intentional and meaningful way. So revealing previously hidden or suppressed information, cover-ups, and other forms of dishonesty. Okay, this is going to be big. People's minds are going to, some of them are going to kind of short circuit, for lack of a better term, because not just Uranus and Gemini is happening, but we are getting this trine energy to Pluto and Aquarius, and Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. So there's this very, very tied together energy between Uranus and Pluto right now. Okay, so the truth will out. Okay, it's already happening. It's already happening big time, and it's going to be so enlightening and freeing and vindicating and helping us move in the right direction in so many ways. And then again, for some people, it's going to shatter parts of their identity because they've been so wrapped up in a certain idea or way of being or group identity that they kind of can't handle it when they find out that it's not what they thought it was. So challenging manifestations. Well, it can basically take a lot of the positive ones and flip them over, slide them to the other side of the spectrum, if you will. Then the challenging things. Ideologies or social movements that take away personal freedom. Okay, whether we're talking about things like property or rights or privacy or family or children or choices, etc., etc., in favor of the group, especially an ideologically special or chosen group, could be increasing in its scope and practice. I don't know if I explicitly stated this, but one of the downsides to Uranus, right? If Uranus represents freedom and liberation, what's the opposite of that, right? Not freedom, not liberation. Okay. So along those lines, we could be talking about loss of freedom or loss of agency due to things like tech surveillance, AI, possibly robots. Not that I just want to blame everything on AI and robots, because I don't think that's the right thing to do, but that's another conversation. Smart cities, 15-minute cities, social credit scores, forcing shared things like tech, like transportation, like homes, possibly. Again, abolishing private property, that whole just funk of communist, socialist ideology that's really ramping back up. And the last time it really ramped back up, Uranus was in Gemini also. So those things are ultimately authoritarian. Now, if people want to choose to live on a commune and do that kind of thing, you know, great. But forcing it on humanity at large, I think, is going to be, in some areas, quite an issue. It is already, but in some places, it's going to intensify. Yeah, so there you go. Continuation and acceleration of draconian measures or forced integration. You know what that means. If you know, you know, on local populations, which does no one any favors, ultimately. It just creates ultimately more division and chaos, which I think the people who are doing those things know that. But that's another video for another time. There could be increased efforts to silence, censor, and or surveil the populace, and clashes of opinions that lead to division, and possible severance, meaning a total breakdown. Now, a total breakdown, if it is a Uranian-Plutonian double punch there, in the sense of totally breaking something down, that can go either way. That could come out in ways that ultimately are more positive and more human-focused and life-giving, or it can flip to, you know, more severe forms of inhumaneness, violence, and all kinds of things that we don't want. If we look back at, even though this didn't happen during Pluto in Aquarius, but if we look at like the Jacobite rising, right, it was just blood and terror and horrible things enacted upon the masses until things could get sorted out. So as a possibility, it could go the other way, right? The total breakdown could become more humanitarian, and we actually get rid of these globalist, inhumane, authoritarian, you know, dressed up as humanitarian, but not really efforts to control. It's all about power and control. And if we can break that down in a positive way and re-engineer things so that it's not so communist, socialist, technocratist, globalist crap, I think would be the best outcome, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. Disruptions to transportation systems. I would say both, again, locally, the Gemini side of the spectrum, and internationally, the Sagittarius side. So it's going to happen on both ends. Technological systems that control freedom of movement, things like carbon passports, Again, 15-minute cities, just crap like that, which is so anti-human and humane. Even though the people that are doing them are pretending that it's the opposite. More things that are difficult here. Doubling down on gaslighting, propaganda, obfuscation, equivocation, semantics, word salads, and other activist types of tools, or authoritarian types of tools in general that manipulate and control narratives and undermine honest dialogue. That, again, could increase. We could also see the furthering of idea hijacking, right, or word hijacking, or just additional types of hijacking where we've already seen this, but it takes something that looks good on the surface, but it's actually completely inverted and perverted. Like it's an enticing word, like community. It sounds great, but what do you actually mean by community? Equality, but what do you mean by equality? Like those types of things. We have to be careful about words, right? Words being distorted, reversed, co-opted, all those kinds of things, which most of us are already aware of. We have to be careful of it getting even worse. So really learning how to spot these types of things, familiarizing yourself with how this mind hijacking works, is really, really important to, maybe that's one of the new things that you learned from Uranus and Gemini, how to protect your mind. Speaking of mind, there could be a mental overload, information overload, right? Where it's just this like fatigue, or it leads to not knowing what to think, not knowing what to believe. That could also be part of the media or AI, where it's easy to tell now, or at least it is to me, when things are AI generated, but that may not be true by the end of Uranus and Gemini. It might be incredibly hard to tell. So again, having to pay attention, learn what kind of is the human side and the not human side of some of these things is going to be important. Tech, information, or changes moving too fast for humanity to keep up. Again, loss of humanity in some way is a potential problem with not just Uranus and Gemini, but it's flowing energy towards Pluto and Aquarius, that we have to make sure that we're doing things that keep our human connection, so that we're not just giving everything over to this transhumanist, techno-globalist, dystopian, 1984ian, if you know, nightmare that many people are trying to force upon humanity at this time. Let's not go there. All right, so the Ingress chart. So this is what the chart looked like when Uranus moved into Gemini. I don't usually include those kinds of things in my videos, but I thought this one was important because it's unique. It's a basket shape, which doesn't happen all the time. It's fairly rare configuration. But what I really appreciate about it, and I wanted to give some good news, is that it's a supportive pattern. Okay, think about, what do you put in a basket, right? We put babies in them to protect them, right? We put things we care about in a basket to hold them. So that's a good thing, I think. I think it lends a lot of energy towards hopefully moving more en masse towards the more positive manifestations of not just Uranus and Gemini, but all the outer planets where they've moved, because they're all working in harmony with one another right now. Now, again, that can go not so great either, because harmony and flow means that there's just no obstruction, like it's just free going. So great if you wanted to turn on the tap to get a glass of water, not so great if the water doesn't stop running and it floods your whole house, right? But my hope is that this is supportive, that we can build something new. We can put new things in our basket that we care about, that we eventually take the lid off of and share and make an actual better, not so dystopian nightmare of a world. That is my hope, and I'm sticking to it. All right, 2025 to 2023, there are your Uranus in Gemini dates. For those of you who like that one, you can screenshot this and keep it. Again, July 7th is when it went in. It will retrograde this fall, and then it'll re-enter Gemini in February of 2026 and stay there for the rest of the time before it moves on to the next sign. Our impact. So who's going to feel this one? It's always an interesting question. Well, everyone's going to feel it. Now, whether it feels more personalized, like it's happening more in your internal world versus whether it happens more in your external world, will also depend on how much it's impacting your chart or where it's impacting your chart. So if you have Uranus and Gemini, you're getting a return. Congratulations. You're going to be somewhere around your mid-80s, which is awesome. Planets in Gemini, especially your Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, and or Mars, those are the personal planets. They're going to feel them even more. If you have Gemini on an angle, like you're a Gemini rising, for example, that's a big one. If you have one of the nodes, either one, the North or the South node in Gemini, or if you have planets and angles in the other mutable signs, which are Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, you're going to be getting some pretty dynamic energy hitting your chart throughout this transit. So now let's take a look at the houses. All right. So for my Aries risings out there, you are getting this Uranus transit in your third house. And really what's in store for you is you're being asked to reinvent your relationship with communication and connection. Okay. Whether that's how you process information, how you speak, how you share your ideas with those in your sphere. Okay. There is a possibility here for some emotional tension because the moon is in opposition over in that 9th house of your bigger ideas or your belief systems. Okay. If that's coming up, it means that there is something that you need to let go of, some kind of belief that's holding you back from networking in the way that you want to. Okay. Or where you want to go is maybe another way to say it. So there's a possibility for unexpected changes with your sibling relationships, with your local community, and your local networks. If there have been early messages or shame around things like asking too many questions, knowing the right answer, not knowing the answer, being punished for speaking, particularly maybe bluntly, or too much. All of those types of things are going to come up, and Uranus is going to help you move past them. Okay. It may be by intensifying or bringing more of them to you, which I know is maybe never the most fun choice, but that's ultimately how we move them along. Okay. If you can, remember to listen before you act. Saturn in your first house can be helpful here. So it really is a time to liberate your mind and the way you were taught that things had to be, so that you can find something that fits where you have evolved to. Okay. And that's for my Aries risings. My Taurus risings. So you all are going to experience Uranus moving through your 2nd house. And what's in store here is changes that are coming to your financial resources, your personal resources, your values, your talents, your assets. Okay. These do not need to be negative changes. Okay. They can be quite positive, actually. So what we're looking for is we're pointing you towards potentially financial independence or freedom from how you have viewed material resources. Okay. Perhaps it's been a preoccupation with defining your worth or your value on who you know or what you know. Okay. It's a possibility that that's going to shift. There's also a possibility here that latent talents, things that were asleep or kind of below the surface, they wake up at this time. And that can help you lead to a more joyful, curious, spontaneous relationship with yourself, right? So try new things, but don't let it get you hung up on feeling like you have to knock over your entire game board or just change everything up or, again, do all the things at once, because you don't, right? So you don't have to scatter yourself needlessly to be of value. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to have it all in general, okay? if there have been messages around not feeling valued for your ideas or what you say, or even how much you say, okay, how much you know, how much you don't know, it's time for Uranus to help you break free of these things. If you feel like you always have to have an answer, always be helping in order to be valued, then those shackles can be left behind right now as well. Ultimately, this could potentially lead you towards finding new ways of doing your work and how you want to live your life day to day and what you are known for as well. So that's for my Taurus risings. All right. So for my Gemini risings, you have Uranus going through your first house. And for most people, this is a once in a lifetime transit. Possibly you'll get it a second time if you were born with Gemini in your first, or excuse me, with Uranus in Gemini in your first house. But if not, this is a once in a lifetime transit for you. Now, if you're reading this from the viewpoint of you have Gemini occupying most of your first house, but your ascendant is not in Gemini, and this won't be quite as intense for you. But for those of you who are reading this as Gemini is your first house and you have your ascendant in Gemini, this is where things are going to get really wild and interesting for you, because the ascendant is one of the sensitive points in our chart. So you're looking at a personal revolution, really, when we get down to it. Your aesthetics, your identity, your relationships, all of them might feel unstable or kind of maybe even electrified and exciting, extra so, for a while. There's going to be a growing realization that your relationships have to evolve as you do. Okay. So what this means is that not all of your relationships are going to come through this transit intact. Okay. Some people are not going to be able to walk with this evolved version of you. And that's okay. Ultimately, it may be challenging, it may be disheartening, but ultimately, you really want your relationships to match who you are. And if who you are is changing quite a bit, well, then the relationships have to as well. So you've got about 7.5 years here. Okay. So it may not happen all at once. It may be over quite a period of time that things either will feel like they're changing, fragmenting, coming back together, or they are coming back together first and fragmenting. It really just depends on your own individual journey. But what we're looking for here is eventually you to feel more free and liberated from any stories or scripts or things that told you you have to be a certain way. Okay, the first house can tell us a lot about how we were given messages about how life is supposed to be, how we're supposed to be, who we're supposed to be to gain acceptance from other people. That can come up in the first house. So if there's anything around like you're supposed to know everything, or you're supposed to have an answer, or you have to take care of your siblings and not yourself, or you're not allowed to speak up, or you've been punished for that, all of those kinds of things are going to come up for you to change them and ultimately break free from them, right? Keep in mind, who you are is important. You speaking up is important, right? You know this already on an intrinsic level, but now your life is going to match it in a different way. Even if you have to go through a period where you are being shut down or pushed back, or it feels like people are more inclined to be miscommunicating with you, ultimately it's to reshape so that you can articulate more authentically the real internal you and who you want to be now and going forward, because we all change and evolve over our lifetime. So this is a good thing that's coming. I hope it's an exciting and amazing time for you, even if it's a little rocky or weird or upside down. Breathe. Gemini is about breathing, right? Take care of your nervous system. And remember, it's okay not to have all of the answers, to have to say the right thing. It's okay if people misunderstand you. It's all good at the end of the day. The right ones, the right relationships, will find you when you can be more aligned with who you are and what you really actually think and want to say. All right, Cancer rising. So, my darling Cancer risings, this is a fun one. You've got Uranus going through your 12th house. Now, I don't want to scare my Cancer risings because you've been through a lot. Pluto in Capricorn was quite a challenging time for, I'm going to go ahead and be generous and say every single Cancer rising that I've talked to. No matter what age you are or your gender or where you live or the culture you come from, Cancer risings really, really went through the ringer over the last 15 years, particularly the last 5 to 8 years. So Uranus is going to go through your 12th house. And the 12th house is one of those kind of tricky houses because it's not the house that's necessarily easily seen by us as the chart holder. Okay. So the 12th house has to do with things that are hidden or that are subconscious or that are kind of removed, taking a step back from the day-to-day interactions. Okay. It has to do with our dream world as well. So really what's shifting here is going on behind the scenes. And depending on what other planets are here, how much of Gemini occupies your 12th house versus your 11th or your first house is also going to dictate some different things here. But a lot of this is going to be about uncovering some stuck subconscious patterns that have to do with being silenced or second guessed or misunderstood or punished in some way for speaking up or speaking your mind or speaking freely. Okay. It's really time to heal those areas of your chart. Okay. And let Uranus break open what's been stuck. A lot of the 12th house can be things that are what we call karmic or inherited, right? They're kind of like in the basement of who we are because they just got passed down to us. And we don't really know necessarily what's down there until we excavate it. Okay. So this is possible, or this is possibly going to come through, again, your dreams, your time in chosen solitude, meditation, retreats, things like that kind of nature. You may get, again, sudden downloads, these aha moments, these breakthroughs. You may have dreams or visions that help you to clarify where you want to go in your future, or perhaps what it is you want to say or share or contribute in some way. So this is really an important and amazing time period where you're rebuilding trust in your intuition, in your mind, and in your voice, and moving away, possibly once and for all, a lot of the voices that aren't even yours, that are shaping what you're thinking about on an internal basis, and that may not be in your best interest. Uranus is going to help you break free from those. Okay. It's also going to help you get, again, latent abilities. This may be more of like an intuitive knowing type of thing, having answers all of a sudden. And again, getting things that come through your away time or your dream time. That's going to be really important during this transit so that you can really prepare for Uranus going to that first house, which is going to be pretty awesome. But there's a lot going on in your chart. So whatever is stuck, Uranus is going to help you get it unstuck. All right, my Cancer risings, I'm sending you all the best with this transit because it's really going to be great and help you ultimately. Leo rising. All right, my fabulous, amazing Leo rising. You have Uranus going through your 11th house. And the 11th house has to do with our groups and our alliances and, in a sense, our friendships and our bigger overarching networks, the things that we connect to on a more collective type of level. It also has to do with our hopes and dreams and visions of our future. And this is where Uranus is coming in and it's going to be shaking some things up. It's going to kind of be zhuzhing it up a little bit here. So part of what's happening is you're rewriting your role in the collective. And Uranus is going to potentially radically shift your friend group, your alliances, again, the visions that you had for your future. If they were stuck in some way or no longer aligned with where you're going, they're going to go, right? It's that kind of, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, or to move forward, you have to leave something behind. That's what's kind of happening here in your 11th house. So it's not a bad thing. Okay, don't be worried about losing the crowd. Okay, especially because Gemini in the 11th house is really social. It wants to be connected. That's an important part of how you spend your day-to-day time, is through your literal brothers and sisters in humanity. Okay, but what's happening here is that you need to kind of look at, well, who's making you feel like an outcast, right? Who's recognizing your genius? Who is going through the new version of you? Because remember, you also have Pluto in your 7th house here. So you're getting a lot of relationship changes, whether you like it or not. That's what's on the menu. And this is shaping how you are with yourself as well. So we need to look at themes or stories around being too much or too dramatic, or potentially even being like too good at something, right? Or maybe you've always been the spokesperson for the group and all of a sudden that's not working anymore. Whatever has happened that can either have given you this tendency to hide from the spotlight, right? If it's the too muchness, or overcompensate and need to kind of hog the spotlight and always be the center of attention, whatever it is will come into balance here. Because this transit is going to help you, especially again with Pluto in that 7th house, kind of weed out and figure out what's in over or under compensation. Because ultimately, it's about realigning your relationship dynamics across the board. And that will be a great thing when all is said and done, even if going through it is less than pleasant. Keep your head up. All is good. You're going to find the people that really get you, know you, and love you for who you are, and don't think you're too much, and encourage you to shine and be yourself. Okay. Virgo risings, my amazing Virgo risings. So you're having Uranus move through your 10th house. And the 10th house, depending on the house system you use or how you're reading this, may or may not contain your midheaven. If it does, this transit's going to be especially potent for you. If it does not, it may feel a little bit less impactful. It just kind of depends. So, excuse me, I needed some water there. Our 10th house has to do with how we're seen in the public, or also sometimes what we look up to, right? So it's possible that we're talking about your career. It's possible that we're talking about a family role that you have, because that 10th, 4th house axis does have to do with home and family. So perhaps it's a parenting topic that may come up for you at this time. It's also just how people know you. Even if you don't have a career yet, or maybe you're not a parent, it's how you're known in the public sphere, what you're recognized for. Okay, so everything that you've built up until this point is somehow going to be redesigned or shaken up or electrified. It doesn't have to be negative. It doesn't mean that you're just going to lose your job tomorrow. It could be that you're finally getting the recognition that you deserve or that you've been working towards, right? Particularly things that have to do with how you write or speak or communicate. That could all actually be where the Wheel of Fortune turns in your favor and you receive a lot of recognition or get known for those types of endeavors. So if your career is disrupted, it's not necessarily because you failed, right? It's because something was stagnant. Something needed to move you along to a new version of yourself, okay? It's also possible that how you're known or this public persona that you have, it just feels kind of like, doesn't fit anymore. It feels a little rusty and crusty. Okay, so it may be that you go through a public image reinvention at this time. Okay, so whatever it is that's changing, again, be open to it, work with it to the best of your ability. We don't want the lid to blow off the pot. We want some steam to come out. So if there's something that you can do to help yourself along this way, whether it's taking a speaking class, it's writing, it's maybe it's getting on like a social media platform, or it's becoming an educator, or maybe it's about you homeschooling your children or something of that nature. Look into it, go for it. Let yourself kind of have a little bit of perhaps uncertainty potential here, because Uranus can feel kind of uncertain. We don't really quite know where it's going to take us. So there's something here that's also wanting to free you about worrying too much because you got to worry about it somewhat, right, Virgo rising? But worrying about it too much, what people think of you, what people say potentially about you, or how you speak, or feeling like you have to be overly helpful, or you have to always have the right answers for things. If something like that is coming up, Uranus is going to help you break free from the need to ruminate on all of these types of things, right? So ultimately, take care of your nervous system. Try not to get super stuck in your head. If you do find yourself getting super stuck in your head, that's because Uranus is actually trying to point something that needs a pressure release. So try something that's actually not thinking. Whether you have to sing out loud, or you need to go to the sauna, or you need to go like run down the street, do something that moves the energy that's not mental. Okay, because a lot of this pressure is going to be too much mental. You're going to need to release it in a different way. So whatever you started learning to do potentially during the previous transit, these last like 7-ish years with Uranus and Taurus, bring that back now. Okay, like the somatic work, moving. Again, maybe you just need to ride your bike somewhere so you get out of your head. Okay, don't let mental pressure get to you, Virgo. I promise you're doing enough already. I promise. Okay, so that's for my Virgo risings. Libra rising. All right, my darling Libras, you have got Gemini moving, or excuse me, Uranus and Gemini moving through your 9th house. So this is in some ways a belief overhaul. Okay, you could be getting new or novel ideas in teaching, publishing, communication, rediscovering what's around you. Okay, there's a possibility here to do things differently in networking and ideas, having a lot of opportunities that come through people in your local sphere that you know, that can help you open and expand your mind in ways you would not have thought possible previously to this transit. Because what's really happening here is, in some way, you're outgrowing your worldview and the messaging that you received in your early years. Okay, so this is all about getting curious, integrating your knowledge with your lived experience. Okay, so we want to make sure that this is not just theory that we're talking about here, but that you actually can get kind of hands-on with some of the things that you've been thinking about, or believing in, or want to learn about in an expanded kind of way. It's also time to look at, well, who taught me to think this? Or who taught me that this is the only truth? Or what is it that I actually believe in relationship to what I've been told I should be believing? Okay. So it's possible that this will come from any different avenues, such as your culture, right? It's potentially your university, the way you grew up, the people that were around you, right? You need to start asking yourself, is there something more, right? Is there something I haven't seen yet? Is there another way of thinking about this, or looking about this, or valuing something else that I haven't really been able to articulate, but my heart's kind of longing for. I need some kind of exchange that lights me up in a new way. Okay. Wherever you have those kind of nagging feelings or that little kind of itch you can't scratch, get curious about it. See what opens up, because Uranus here can really blow apart your belief system in the best ways. Some of them may be really challenging, just depending on how attached you are to what you've been taught or what you've known about as your world, okay, whatever that means to you. But it can be a really, really exciting transit. And so I'm really looking forward to this for my Libra risings. I think there's a lot of really exciting possibilities that are going to be opening up to you over the next 7 years. And I wish you all the best with your Uranus transit here. Scorpio risings. So, my darling Scorpio risings, you've got Gemini in your 8th house. And I always find it fascinating how the water rising signs have this kind of connection to where their air houses are, right? They've got them in 4, 8, and 12. And so there's this kind of interesting correlation between feeling and thinking. And when we're talking about having Gemini in the 8th house, we're talking about things that we may be intellectualizing, that we need to be experiencing. Or it could be the other way around, where we have all these emotions and feelings that we need to put words to. So you can kind of go either way here. What we're looking for with the 8th house has to do with intimacy. Okay, it's the merging of things together. This could be in a money sense. It could be in a relationship sense. It could be in a shared assets kind of way. It also has to do with our psychology, right? It has to do with where we go to renew ourselves. So in some ways, this is like a renewal of your mind on one or many levels. And again, this is possibly going to have to do with lovers or money, or even an inheritance of some kind. So what really needs to happen here is some kind of untangling. When the outer planets go through our 8th house, they point to things that either society or families, or in the 8th house, it could be a little bit kind of karmically. It's one of those houses that have gotten us kind of bound up, and that our job is to untangle. So Uranus is going to help you untangle things that are here. And it may not be things that are immediately obvious. Okay, the 8th house is definitely a mysterious house. But most of what needs to be done here is ultimately going to break you free mentally, emotionally. Again, perhaps it's going to be bringing things up to the surface for you to examine, which as a Scorpio rising, you most likely have had already quite a bit of experience with. So it's going to be definitely an interesting transit here. It doesn't have to be a bad transit at all. Remember, it really can electrify you and open up your mind to things that maybe you hadn't previously considered, okay, in the areas of intimacy or sharing resources, right? It can also help you kind of move beyond any stagnant scripts that you have around these areas, whether, again, it's something that maybe you feel like you have to be super congenial or experimental, or you have to always talk things out instead of feel them. And this transit's going to kind of flip the script on that. It could be the other way around. I see it for both, depending on what else is going on in your chart, Scorpio rising. But this is really an interesting opportunity to free your mind in ways that you could not have previously imagined. So dive into it, see what it brings up for you. And I'm sending you all kinds of love, my dear Scorpio risings. Sagittarius rising. All right, so you've got Uranus going through the 7th house. And the seventh house is a little less complicated than the eighth house, but it's not without its complications either. So the seventh house really is a relationship house if we get down to it. But what type of relationship? So the seventh house has to do with hopefully kind of an equal partnership, right? Remember, this is Libra's house in the natural zodiac. So it's the scales. It wants things to be balanced, hopefully fair, and hopefully harmonious. So with Gemini, you're kind of also attuned to that, right? Gemini's got its two-sidedness as well as Libra. Now, when we're talking about relationships, it's possible that it's a romantic relationship, but it's also possible that it's a business partnership or even a contract. That's part of why the seventh house is the house of marriage, is because back in the day, when we were putting together the houses, marriage was more strictly, I guess is the way to say it, a contract. Now, it still is a contract, right, between two people. So what's going on here is that partnerships of all kinds really are up for a reinvention for you. Okay, it's going to be shaking things up. It's going to be shaking the way that you connect or think that you have to connect, right? So hopefully we're, by the end of this transit, going to have some clarity around relating, not further codependence, because that's something that can be a little challenging for Gemini here, even though it may not seem like it on the surface. Again, remember, Gemini is looking for its other half, right? And the Libra part of this chart, the seventh house, also has to do with that partnership, that other half. Okay, so there is the possibility, really, for any sign of codependence when we're talking about the seventh house. Okay. The seventh house also has to do with projection. So be on the lookout for that during this Uranus transit. If you find yourself seeing another person and you think, ugh, why are they always so, blah, 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 fill in the blank, it's very likely that they are mirroring to you something about yourself. Okay, whether it's something you like or don't like, or owning or disowning. It's usually the stuff that we're disowning. Okay, but it could be something that you actually admire. Like maybe you look at something like, wow, why are they always so blah, 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 fill in the blank. Well, you have that capacity too. And so Uranus will help you understand these kind of mental scripts that you have, again, whether they're positive or negative, with other people, how other people should be, how you're supposed to be, things that they have that you want, things that you like, that you don't like. It's going to be one giant mirror. And so Uranus here really is trying to, again, free you from relationship dynamics that ultimately don't work. Okay, so this is going to be partly the early messaging that you received, especially because you have Pluto going through your third house, that there may have been a lot around the topics of not fitting in or being weird, or that you have to not speak up in relationships, or maybe it's the other way around, that you talk so much in a relationship that the other person can't breathe, right? Something like that could be coming up. So whatever it is, ultimately, again, we're looking for you having a new relationship to relationship, right? But don't forget the one with yourself as well, okay? Because the opposition here is to that ascendant in Sagittarius. So a lot of this has to do with belief systems about how you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to show up, how the other person's supposed to be, and how they're supposed to show up, okay? And a lot of that is going to get shaken by Uranus in the seventh house, but also by Pluto going through that third house. So be kind to yourself, okay? Be kind to other people. Try to have a little patience and tolerance here. There is something here where you can meet unusual people, okay? You can have unusual experiences that actually break open rigidity, again, around beliefs. Whatever that mental script is that you're running about how relationship is supposed to be, Uranus can come along here and kind of bust that open and ultimately give you some really, hopefully, fun and incredible experiences that change you for the better. going forward. Whatever's stale, it's going to have to go. So that's for my Sagittarius risings. All right, Capricorn rising, you have Uranus going through your 6th house. So the 6th house is a lot of things. One of the things it is the house of health. Okay, it also has to do with our daily routine and habits, including our work potentially, how we show up for service as well, but hopefully not servitude. So in this house, really, really important to give Uranus a release so that you don't get stuck in what could be some health problems from built up pressure, okay? Make sure you pay attention to your body if there's anything going on in that sphere. So what's in store for you is really big changes around how you show up day to day, right? What do you do? Who do you want to be? How do you want to work? Whom do you want to serve? Because you went through a really, really profoundly life-changing transit with Pluto coming over your ascendant and into your 1st house. If you have Capricorn as your ascendant, this was even bigger of a change than some of the other things that would have happened over the last 15 years. Kind of almost like a reframe or a reset of your entire compass of your life. And so now your day-to-day life needs to reflect those kinds of changes that you've gone through in your personal life and in your world at large. So what we're doing is we're looking here for things that may be overriding your capacity. Okay, this is not about keeping busy or having to always show up even though you're tired, right? This is about making a new relationship with your mind-body connection, definitely. And it's also changing your work so that it aligns more with who you are now. And again, work could mean your job kind of job. It could be where you volunteer. And it could be something that just has to do more in general with your day-to-day routine. But whatever is going on here, Uranus really wants to open up new avenues for you to connect, for you to network, for you to share, for you to learn more. So this could also be a place where you receive new training or new education to potentially change careers or look towards something in, maybe if it's not the entire career, like changing how you do aspects of your career, because you also have Pluto going through your 2nd house now. And 2nd house has part to do with how we earn, the values that we have, the talents that we hold and we possess. So there's a flow here between those things going on. And we definitely want to make sure that you have a release for that and that you're kind of getting out in front of bigger changes that could occur in those areas in your life, if possible. Okay. You definitely want to make sure that you're being of service and not servitude, because that is something that's challenging for Capricorn rising. You tend to take a lot of things quite seriously and can overdo, right? So don't feel like you have to know everything. Don't feel like you have to have all of the answers, although that might be harder than it seems. But really, really try to tap in and tune into both your mind and your physical body at this time. If things are coming up where you're finding there's some body-related things, check in with your internal script in your mind. What's showing up? What were you told about how you had to live your life day to day, or how you had to show up for other people? Does that still match who you are now and where you want to go in the future? Or does that match the kind of the shakeups, the inklings of change that are already on the horizon that you don't want to ignore? Okay, so that's for my Capricorn rising. I hope that's helpful, and I wish you all the best with this transit. Aquarius rising. Well, you are going through what the Capricorn risings just went through in terms of Pluto going over your ascendant, if you have an Aquarius ascendant, or going through your 1st house, which is a huge upheaval of change. Now, I know this video is about Uranus, but I wanted to take a moment and acknowledge Pluto in that 1st house because it relates to Uranus in your 5th house. Uranus being the ruling planet of Aquarius will have some say over what Pluto is doing for the next few years as well. So the first and fifth house connection here has to do with how you see the world, how you show up, what you expect life to be like, your physical body and appearance and things of that nature. And the fifth house has to do with how you express those kinds of things in a creative way, how you engage romantically, how you are relating to your own inner child, or perhaps if you have children, your children in a literal sense. So what's happening here with this fifth house is, okay, who you are is rapidly, majorly changing with that Plutonian energy here. And how you express yourself needs to reflect that in some way. It also, you need an outlet for all the things that are happening on a personal level. And so that's why Uranus here is going to be actually a really good friend to you during your Pluto transit. So whatever it's been, Uranus in the fifth house is wanting you to rediscover or reinvigorate your creative side, your self-expression, right? Your desire and capacity for joy. The fifth house, I like to think of as the house of fun, right? It's romance, it's gambling, it's risk-taking, it's games, it's things that light us up and make us, again, kind of feel like we're a kid again. And it gives us that joyful freedom of being who we are. And so there's something here that, again, needs an outlet, needs you to speak or to sing or to write or to share or to find, maybe it's a friend or another connection that you can do these things with. Okay. So whatever is really kind of tugging at you, that's what's trying to show you there's a part of yourself that needs acknowledgement here. Okay. Again, this may be a new path, or it could be something that is coming back from the past. Like perhaps you had something that you wanted to work on when you were younger, but for whatever reason, life responsibilities got in the way. And now is a time to bring that back. Okay. Whatever that thing is. So allow yourself some space to process all the things that you're going through, and also to, in a sense, reclaim or reinvigorate your not so serious side, the part of you that really just needs to have space for all the changes that are going on and has something really important and creative to share. Whether or not you've been recognized for that, do it anyway. Sometimes the sharing portion comes after we've already done the creative act. Okay, so don't be afraid to do one thing before the other shows up. I am sending you lots of love, my amazing Aquarius risings. Pisces rising. So last but certainly not least, we've got Uranus in the fourth house for all my amazing Pisces rising friends. So the fourth house is really the foundational house in our chart. It has a lot to do with the family that we came from, our roots, and our inheritance in that sort of way. The eighth house is how we receive that inheritance, but the fourth house is kind of how it shows up. Could also have to do with your literal home, your literal family, or for some of you, it's going to have to do with retirement, because the fourth house also represents the end of the matter. However this shows up for you, the fourth house is a little bit of a sensitive point in our chart. So with Uranus coming through here, this may not be the most comfortable transit, because typically the fourth house is the house that we want to be really stable, right? If it's our foundation, we don't necessarily want it to be shaken up all that much, okay? Now, luckily you have Gemini here. So Gemini does like some movement, and that's a good thing, because that'll help kind of ameliorate anything that feels too out of whack with movement. But the challenging part is it could also indicate that there's even more movement than usual, and it feels a little chaotic here. So what's going on is really there's a restructuring in that foundational realm. Again, it could be literally, for some of you, you may be remodeling your home, for example. For some of you, you could be moving to a new place. For some of you, it could be changes in family duties. Perhaps you have children who have grown to the age where they're leaving home, okay? So something here is going to change dramatically your home base feeling, whether that's internally or that's externally. So I've named quite a few of external things, but what if it's something that's internal? Well, a lot of times that has to do with our inherited stories around our family. Okay. So the fourth house is, again, something around inheritance, around lineage. And there is possibility here that there's been some kind of story, some kind of script, possibly a relationship with a sibling that has been or has gotten to the point where it's stuck or it's stagnant or it's possibly a little like authoritarian or restrictive. And that's where Uranus comes in and says, all right, it's time to clean some of these things out. It's time to move them along. Okay. So again, this could be something that's more internally based, whether it's happening, within your own emotional security realm, or something that's happening in the external space. Either way, make sure to take good care of yourself during this time, whatever you have that you can do to have some support, to network, to speak, to do breath work, whatever your modality of self-care looks like, you're going to need it during this time, or it's going to change around this time. Okay. Don't let that freak you out too much. when we talk about certain houses with certain planets, sometimes there's a combination of factors that seem like they may be more daunting than they actually are. And sometimes they're just challenging in general, no matter how we frame it. So the fourth house can be a house that's challenging no matter how we frame it. Okay. Whatever it is that's going on here, if you're starting to feel restless or uncomfortable, or, there's this need to kind of like just topple over the whole board, try to give Uranus a little bit of a release in some way before the lid blows off. Okay. Especially if you're dealing with family dynamics. Again, sometimes the lid just needs to blow off, and that's the way it is. But if there's something you can do to help changes along before it gets to that point, then Uranus doesn't have to necessarily be so dramatic. However, there's a little bit of a caveat here because you do have Pluto in that 12th house, feeding more energy into that 4th house. So if the family karmic story difficult lid does blow off, it can be, even if it's difficult, it can be a source of liberation that ultimately helps you in ways that you never could have imagined prior, to where you really do feel like you have your mind back, that you have the ability to speak and to talk and to have ideas that reflect who you are be shared out and appreciated. With Uranus in the 12th, or excuse me, with Aquarius in the 12th, sometimes there's a deeper layer of feeling like an outcast or a reject that shows up in how we relate to our family, or shows up in how we show up with our own emotional security. And so if Uranus is breaking those things apart, remember, you can get support. Perhaps it's, you start speaking with a therapist or something like that, or there's some really great online support groups for people who are going through that are facilitated by therapists that are, can share your story with, and realize that you're not just alone. You're not just this outcast or the black sheep or something that's wrong within your family dynamic. Again, this can be a really, really liberating time for those of you that may be going through that sort of change, although that won't be true for all of you. And again, just touching on the retirement again, Uranus, if you're at a stage where you're in retirement age, Uranus can give you that kind of reinvigoration for life, that it's time to get a new, what do they say, lease on life, that it's time to find new family, even if they're not blood relatives, right? It's kind of this sense of like, I have a camaraderie and I have things that feel like it lights up my inner world. Perhaps it would indicate a move of some sort, so that you're maybe downsizing from all of the responsibilities you had before and can feel lighter and more liberated and more mobile and more free to explore the world around you. So for some of you, that will also be the case. whatever it is, I'm wishing my amazing Pisces rising all the best during this Uranus transit. All right. Thank you. You made it to the end with me of this video, whether or not you watched the whole thing. And I just wanted to take a moment to appreciate each and every one of you that watches my videos, that likes them, that comments, lets me know what you think, because it really does help a lot. If you have comments, I'm happy to answer them to the best of my ability. If they're super personal, I won't answer them on YouTube comments because that's just not really appropriate. If you want some help with your chart, I do personal readings. There is a link in the description that you can click on and book through my website. If you have any additional things that you'd like me to cover, let me know in the comments so that I can share some knowledge or my perspective on them. Either way, I hope this was helpful, and I'm wishing you all the best until the next time. Thanks. Take care.